everyone. So today we are going to do my 2020 yearly wrap up. So first of all, I read 55 books in 2020. 9 of those were rereads because it was a tough year. And so through like April and early summer, I reread a lot of my old favorites because I was just having a hard time reading new stuff. We were all going through a lot. And I also DNF'd 2 books, and DNF stands for did not finish. But those 2 aren't counted in the 55 because I only count books that I finish in the overall total. And they're also not counted in any of the other statistics I'm about to show you. So to get into the statistics and breaking it down by genre, I want to add that it's kind of hard to break books down by genre because many of them spread over multiple genres, like Addie LaRue was really hard to categorize. So I tried to pick the one to me that stood out the most and represented the book the most. Each book is only represented one time. So by category, I read 18 adult, 16 YA, 8 nonfiction, 7 graphic novel, 2 middle grades, 2 classics, and 2 poetry books. So I based these statistics off of my shelves on Goodreads, and I don't have a shelf dedicated for new adult fiction, but I did read some books that I would classify as new adult, specifically A Court of Thorn and Roses. And so I chose to classify that as YA, just for the purpose of this video. In new adult, it probably leans more YA, but it is definitely not like true YA because there are a lot of adult scenes in that book. So it's kind of a gray area, and I like the new adult genre and I hope to see it grow in the future, but I haven't read enough to really have a dedicated shelf on Goodreads. So I chose not to have that shelf represented, but I did read some new adult. Okay, and by genre, I'm actually really proud of myself because I read a lot of different genres pretty equally. So 11 contemporary / literary fiction / romance. I know that's a really broad category, but I read like 1 true romance, which was Red, White, and Royal Blue. And so I categorized that as romance, but I didn't want to have just like one romance. And a lot of my literary and contemporary also had romantic themes, so that's why I just combined this all into one category. 8, high fantasy. I would classify high fantasy as anything that is outside of our world, like it takes place in a different world, or there's some sort of like portal that transports you to a different world. And that can be like a physical portal or like a metaphorical portal like in Harry Potter. Now, it kind of gets confusing because you have things set in space, which you might want to categorize as sci-fi, but a lot of space books that I read don't actually have a lot of science in them, like Star Wars. I think I ended up categorizing Star Wars books into high fantasy. 8 nonfiction, which I think is the most nonfiction I've ever read in a single year. 7 graphic novels, 7 sci-fi, 6 mystery, thriller, horror, 6 low fantasy. And low fantasy would be things that take place in our world but have magical elements. So like urban fantasy or paranormal, basically the Twilight books would be low fantasy. Addie LaRue would be low fantasy, but I think I instead chose to count that toward literary fiction. And then 2 poetry books. So pretty even spread. I'm happy with that. And then format. I listened to 35 audiobooks this year. I think most of those were from my library. My library doesn't have the Libby app, but it has something similar. It's not as, the user interface isn't as good, but the concept is the same. And then I read 12 physical books and 8 ebooks. So I would like to read more physical books and ebooks because I fear I'm getting to the point to where I can only ingest books by listening to them because I don't have the attention span to actually sit down and read. But at the same time, like, reading is reading. So if I have to resort to audiobooks, I'm okay with that. So those were the statistics. And now I want to get to best by category. In the contemporary / literary fiction / romance category, the best, as you can probably tell, is for me The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I read this in November, and I know I didn't really talk about it that much. I talked about it in one of my reading vlogs. I didn't really get to talk about this book. It was fantastic. I've read several of Schwab's other books, and I have not really liked many of them, but this one is totally different from anything I've ever read by her, and just in general. It was very unique. It was written beautifully. I loved the plot. I loved Addie. I loved the themes of memory. It was great, and I loved it, and I gave it 5 stars, so definitely the best in this category. I did want to give an honorable mention to 11 Hours by Pamela Erins. This is a novella about a woman about to give birth, basically. And it was great. I really liked it, and I don't hear anyone talking about this book ever. I love the relationship between her and her nurse, and how you got to find out more about both of their lives as the story went on. It was really good. And then another honorable mention to all of my rereads, especially Rainbow Rowell. She's my comfort author. Her books are like not literary masterpieces, but I love them, and I love the way they're written. I think her humor, it's like she has written her books for me. Fangirl in particular, I reread almost every year, and this year I finally bumped it up to 5 stars. Thank you, Rainbow Rowell, for helping me get through 2020. So the best book in the high fantasy category for me would be The Revenge of the Sith novelization by Matthew Stover. I've never read any of the other Star Wars novelizations, so I don't know how they compare, but this one was fantastic, and it is technically no longer canon, but it doesn't really break the known canon that much, just maybe a little bit. And I read it because I have heard everywhere by Star Wars fans that this is the best novelization, that it is so well written, not just as a Star Wars book, but as any book. And they were right. It was great. So I'm really glad I picked it up. It did help me understand episode 3 a little bit more, and answered a lot of the questions that I've had over the years as I rewatch it. And I'm like, well, why did this happen? And it helped fill those gaps. So really loved reading that one. An honorable mention to a reread. I reread Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie this year. I had not read this since about 6th grade, and I loved it in 6th grade. It was an interesting experience rereading it as an adult. It didn't resonate with me as strongly as it did when I was a preteen. It's like Peter Pan took over my life for about a year when I was a child, but I love it. I just love how fantastical it is. It in many ways felt like coming home to my childhood, so I'm glad that I reread this. Low fantasy is next, and typically I don't like low fantasy books, and if I had categorized Addie LaRue here, that would be the winner. Of the books I read, Addie LaRue is the most low fantasy, but I put it in a different category. So the next book I would say is the best in this category was On a Sunbeam by Tillie Walden. And this is another one of those books where you might want to classify it as sci-fi, and you could probably do that, but there wasn't a lot of science in it. It's just like set in space, so I classified it as low fantasy. I loved it. It was really good. It is kind of a coming of age story. It has flashbacks. There are really like 2 storylines going on about this girl and the current job she has taken on a spaceship, and also it flashes back to her time as a student and another girl she met there. And I just love stories like that where there are flashbacks involved and memories, and how the 2 storylines come together. That will be a theme of this video, really. Like, all the books I love have that same theme. But yeah, that one was really good. And then an honorable mention to the Twilight books. I reread Twilight this year, and I did kind of like a reading vlog on my Instagram and had a ton of fun with it. It was great. Again, like, I know Twilight is not a literary masterpiece, and I know like it's way past its heyday, but there's something about it that I just like. enjoy. And I think it really captures that intensity that you feel as a teenager. It just captures that feeling really well. And so I reread the first book in preparation for Midnight Sun. Again, Midnight Sun is not a literary masterpiece, but I had a lot of fun reading it. So the next category is sci-fi, and I've really been loving sci-fi in recent years. It's becoming my most loved genre. So I had a lot of books to choose from, and I ended up just giving it like a three-way tie. So the first book is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. I read this early in the year before the pandemic hit, which is ironic because it's about a flu that wipes out most of the population. So the timing was a little bit weird on that one. I don't know if I can recommend it because of that topic, because that might like trigger some people, but you might also like relate to it more. So I really liked it though. It took me a little bit to get into it before I liked it. In fact, I had started it the year before and I listened to about like an hour of it and wasn't clicking and had to put it down and then start again later. But I ended up really enjoying it. It's beautifully written. Again, it kind of has like those two storyline structure where you have past and present, and then you get to see how they meet up. And I don't know, that writing style, that structure really works for me. Other ties, we have The Loneliest Girl in the Universe, which has been on my shelf for years, and I found that my library actually has the audiobook, so I read the audiobook this year, and it was so different from what I expected. And it's actually kind of more of a thriller in some ways. I feel comfortable putting it in sci-fi because it does have a lot of sci-fi elements to it, but it turns into much more of a thriller. And I was not expecting that, but I loved it. And this is actually a YA, so it was a very good, surprising, enjoyable read. And then the third book, To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. I just finished reading this in December. It is short. It's about 150 pages or so, and it's so good. And I don't know if I was just more emotional in December, probably. But something about this book really spoke to me, and by the end I was like sobbing, even though I don't know if it's actually like that sad, but it got me. I'm really glad I read this. I have fallen in love with Becky Chambers, which brings us to our honorable mention, the reread, A Closed and Common Orbit. This is, man, it's the second book in the Wayfarers series, but the series isn't, like, the books in the series aren't direct sequels. So chronologically, it does take place after the first book, and I do recommend reading the first book first, but this one is like the gem of the series, and I don't know why it was just stuck in my head this summer, even though I read it back in like 2018, and so I picked it up again and I just loved every moment of it. And again, it has like that two storyline structure of past and present, and then you see them meet up, and the way that it's done in this book is incredible. I can't praise it enough. If you haven't read any of Becky Chambers' other books, they are very sci-fi. They're very inclusive, but it can be a little bit hard to get into at first because it's so different. There are a lot of different species, a lot of different planets, and it can be a little overwhelming at first, but is totally worth it for the way she's able to craft her stories. She's an incredible writer. Super excited for all of her future books. So, okay, mystery, thriller, horror. The best one by far, I think, is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. It was so good. I almost gave it 5 stars. If I were to reread it, I would probably give it 5 stars. My one complaint is that the book has a very like strong 3-act structure, and I didn't really love how disconnected those 3 acts felt from each other. But I mean, that's a pretty small complaint. Everything else about this book is incredible. I love the way it was written. I loved how unsettling it was, like in different ways throughout the story, but I don't know. I loved how it makes you challenge your perspective of characters. I will probably read more from this author in future years. So the best graphic novel, again, would be On a Sunbeam by Tillie Walden. I also read Spinning by the same author, and I like this too. The art style is very similar, but I think that On a Sunbeam just did everything better. The art is gorgeous. Like I can't even like tell you how gorgeous this art is. You just have to like open it and like marvel at it. I loved it, and the story I thought was really good too, so that was the best one. But I read several good graphic novels and comics, manga. This was one of the last books I read this year, but I also really enjoyed the fangirl manga. Of course, I mean, like, you know I love fangirls, so I was bound to love this. This is volume 1. There will be 4 volumes. This one came out in 2020 and was a fantastic way to end the year. So poetry, Night Sky with Exit Wounds by Ocean Vuong, I think. I'm not sure if that's how it's pronounced. Though I did like the other poetry book I read too, The Sun and Her Flowers. They were both really good. And nonfiction, this was a really hard category because all of the nonfiction I read, with the exception of one, all of the others were really, really good. But I chose Invisible Women, Data Bias in a World Designed for Men by Caroline Criado Perez. This book was so good. It was, I mean, basically about how our world is designed for men and all of the like safety testings and drug testings, they all typically use male participants to testing these things and don't include women in the data. Even though like women are built differently, male subjects are default, and that data might not be suitable for women in the real world, and so that can lead to a lot of catastrophic things. Anyway, I don't know if I'm explaining it well, but I recommend this book to everyone. The other nonfiction books I really enjoyed were White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo and The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. I loved both of those. I thought they were really well written. The audiobooks were great, and they really challenged my perspectives and biases, and I got so much out of both of those, so I highly recommend all of those. Okay, everyone, this was a incredibly long video. I hope that you got some good recommendations. I read like 55 books in 2020, and I'm happy with that amount. I pretty much want to read 55 books in 2021. I hope I'm still able to keep the genres diverse, continue to step out of my comfort zone, but also I think it's fine to climb back into your comfort zone in some cases, and I love rereading books. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and I will probably reread some of these in 2021. So let me know which one of these books you are adding to your TBR, or if you read any of them, how you felt about them, what your favorite book of 2020 was, and anything else you want to chat about in the comments. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, tell your friends, all those good things, and I'll catch you next time. Bye. By the way, I'm sorry if my lighting is all weird. I am filming later in the day because this video took a long time to prep, and I'm a procrastinator, so I did most of it this morning. Oh, good. Did you get in your bed? Pretty good spread. I dropped my phone. Go back here. So I base these statistics off of my shelves on Goodreads. Are you gonna? Hi, baby. Which, that's great. The third item is, no, it is actually the second book in the Wayfarers trilogy. No, high fantasy. Nope. What were some of the other things? Just like quality of one's life, I guess. Anyway, I did want to give an honorable mention to 11 Hours by Pamela. Why don't I look this up? So next category, let's try that again, is To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers, by is I also read Spinning by Tillie Walden. Let's try that again. Graphic novel. Sorry if you can hear Rex snoring in the corner here. He's being so cute, so I don't want to wake him up and kick him out, but I don't know, he's snoring kind of loud, so if you hear it on camera, I'm sorry. He's so cute though. I can't disturb him. So the best book in the high, did I say that? I said something weird. Okay. Stress. So low fantasy, this is a hard category. I said that weird. The second book in the why can't I talk today? I actually don't have it. Oh, sorry. One came out in 2020. My stomach is growling. Okay. Even though women are stomach growling again.